In the 6th century BC, during the reign of King Cambyses II of Persia, one of the most infamous executions by skinning alive was carried out. The victim was a high-ranking judge named Cisamnes. He had been entrusted with the duty of upholding justice, but he accepted a bribe and delivered a corrupt judgment. In a society where the king's authority and the legal system were sacred, this act was considered more than just a crime, it was a betrayal of the throne itself. Cambyses II chose a punishment that would not only destroy the man but also serve as a permanent reminder of the consequences of corruption. Sisamnes was publicly skinned alive. His executioners methodically stripped the skin from his body while ensuring that the crowd witnessed every stage of the torment. The agony was prolonged, as the process was designed to keep the victim conscious for as long as possible. Once the skinning was complete, Cambyses ordered that the remains of Cisamnes be used as a warning. His skin was carefully treated and then draped over the very chair on which he had once passed judgments. The throne of justice itself became a chilling symbol of corruption and retribution. To deepen the warning, Cambyses appointed Cisamnes' own son, Otanes, as the new judge, and forced him to sit on the chair covered with his father's skin every time he presided over a trial. The punishment of skinning alive did not originate with Persia alone. Its roots stretched deep into the history of ancient civilizations, where rulers sought not just to kill their enemies but to break them in the most terrifying way imaginable. Among the Assyrians, one of the earliest empires known for its relentless military campaigns, skinning alive was recorded as a standard punishment for rebels and captured leaders. Victims were stripped of their skin, and the remains were displayed on city walls or gates as a grim warning to anyone considering defiance. The purpose was never simply execution. Death could be delivered swiftly with a sword or an arrow. Skinning alive was chosen because it carried a psychological weight. It was designed to prolong suffering, to strike terror in the hearts of onlookers, and to demonstrate the absolute power of the ruler. In some cultures, the act was tied to notions of religious justice. To strip the skin was seen as stripping away honor, humanity, and even the spiritual essence of a person. Whether in the courts of Persia, the palaces of China, or the castles of medieval Europe, the logic remained the same: skinning alive was a spectacle of dominance. The punishment of skinning alive was not only about the final result but also about the process itself. Executioners were often skilled in prolonging the agony, turning the act into a carefully staged ordeal. Knives, hooks, and sharpened blades were the primary tools, though in some cases heated instruments were used to make the suffering even worse. The execution typically began with areas of the body where the skin could be removed without causing immediate death. The back, the limbs, and sometimes the face were the starting points. Strips of flesh were peeled away slowly, ensuring that the victim remained conscious for as long as possible. Executioners were trained to avoid major arteries at first, because a quick death would defeat the purpose of the punishment. Victims often remained alive through much of the process, enduring excruciating pain as layer after layer of skin was removed. In some recorded cases, the flayed skin was nailed to walls, gates, or wooden boards even before the victim had succumbed, turning the punishment into both torture and public display. The spectacle was crucial. Crowds were gathered to witness the execution, and the screams of the condemned served as part of the warning. This was not a private death sentence, it was theater meant to enforce loyalty through terror. Some rulers even used the victim's skin afterward as a symbolic object, stretching it over thrones, covering doors, or displaying it in markets. Skinning alive was not a punishment carried out in haste. It was designed to maximize both physical torment and psychological impact. In the brutality of ancient justice, it was one of the most feared methods, remembered not only by its victims but by entire societies that lived under the shadow of its threat. The execution of Cisamnes under King Cambyses II may be the most well-documented, but it was far from the only instance of skinning alive. Across cultures and centuries, rulers used this method to instill fear and enforce obedience. In the Assyrian Empire, inscriptions and relief carvings proudly recorded the practice. Rebel leaders captured during campaigns were flayed, and their skins displayed on city walls as a declaration of victory. These depictions were not hidden, they were propaganda, proof that the Assyrian king's wrath was inescapable. For subjects who saw the skins of defeated enemies nailed to gates, the message was clear: resistance would be punished with a fate worse than death. China, too, employed the punishment of flaying during certain dynasties. Under the Ming emperors, corrupt officials could face the horror of being skinned alive as both a moral and political lesson. Records describe officials stripped of their skin in public squares, their remains left on display so others in power would remember their duty to the emperor. The punishment was intended not just to end a life but to destroy a reputation, turning the condemned into a permanent warning. Medieval Europe also saw its share of skinning alive. In the 15th century, stories circulated of criminals and traitors being flayed for their crimes. Folklore from the Balkans tells of enemies of rulers flayed alive and their skins displayed on fortresses. In some regions, even bandits and thieves were subjected to the punishment, especially when their crimes threatened social order. The act was deliberately exaggerated in chronicles and legends, ensuring that its terror lived on in cultural memory. These examples reveal that skinning alive was not confined to one part of the world or one period in history. From the walls of Assyrian cities to the courts of China and the castles of Europe, the method was universally recognized as one of the harshest punishments imaginable. Wherever it was practiced, it carried the same meaning, a public declaration of absolute power. Skinning alive was never just about destroying the body. It was equally about the symbolism left behind. For rulers and governments, the act turned human skin into a tool of authority. By displaying it in public, they transformed punishment into a constant reminder of power. In ancient Assyria, flayed skins were nailed to the gates of conquered cities. Every passerby saw them and understood that rebellion brought only horror. The sight of human skin stretched across wood or stone was more than grotesque, it was psychological warfare. It declared that the king's wrath was eternal, and that his enemies would never be forgotten, even in death. The Persian king Cambyses II used Cisamnes' skin to cover the judge's chair, creating a chilling symbol of incorruptible justice. Each time Cisamnes' son sat in that chair, the message was clear: the law was not merely enforced by words, but by fear rooted in blood and flesh. The throne itself became an object lesson, turning justice into a warning rather than a protection. As brutal as it was, the practice of skinning alive eventually began to disappear. The decline came not because rulers suddenly grew merciful, but because methods of governance and justice slowly changed. By the late medieval period, European states were moving toward centralized legal systems and punishments that, while still severe, were more standardized. Hanging, beheading, or burning at the stake became the primary forms of capital punishment, leaving behind the older, more theatrical methods such as flaying. In the Middle East and Asia, the story was similar. By the early modern era, empires such as the Ottoman and Ming turned more toward imprisonment, exile, or swifter executions. The spectacle of skinning alive was seen as excessively cruel even in societies where public executions were common. It was also less practical. Rulers found that other punishments could inspire fear without requiring the slow, grisly process of keeping a victim alive during flaying. The last recorded cases of skinning alive appear in scattered references from the 16th and 17th centuries. Some accounts mention rebels or traitors in Central Asia and Eastern Europe suffering this fate, but by then such punishments were rare, reserved for only the most severe crimes. Eventually, even these references fade, replaced by more modern methods of displaying authority and suppressing dissent. The decline of flaying mirrored the gradual shift in how societies viewed justice. While cruelty remained, punishments began to be justified less by spectacle and more by legal reasoning or religious authority. The slow, agonizing death of skinning alive, once a symbol of unstoppable power, came to be seen as excessive, even counterproductive. What was once a feared and widely used method slipped into the realm of history, remembered for its horror, but no longer practiced.